Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? Welcome to my Sunday or end of month live stream. I'm kind of doing these once a month now, but thank you so much for being here. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about the micro four thirds cameras. Um, so I got a comment, I guess, a couple weeks ago on one of my older videos about why I don't miss full frame cameras. And in that video, I talked about I was shooting with the Nikon D750 at the time, and I bought an EM10 Mark II. Uh, just to carry around, take with me everywhere. Because I didn't know anything about Micro Four Thirds. I knew a little bit about APS-C because I had shot with the D7100 before the D750, and I said, let me just get something smaller. And I was kind of fine with a smaller sensor anyway, because it was not going to be my primary camera for work. Because that's about really near the beginning of when I started doing actually getting paid for my photography. I just wanted some because I was carrying around like this 20, 30 liter backpack to carry all my lenses with my full frame system. And I had enough of that. And that kind of brings up the point of the total benefit or strength of the Micro Four Thirds system is the small size and lightweight. And I made a community post yesterday because I took out my very first camera that I ever bought. It's about 10 years ago. And by first camera, I mean my first serious interchangeable lens digital camera. I did shoot a little bit of film in college, like 35, 40 years ago, or about 35 years ago. Uh, and then there's this big gap between college and about 10 years ago. I really didn't do much photography. And the reason I got into photography back in 2013 was, one of my or both of my dogs had passed away. They lived a long, happy life, but they had passed away, and I didn't have any great pictures of them. They were all like from point and shoot cameras and such, if at all. I had far too few pictures of them, even with the point and shoots. And cell phone cameras weren't a big thing back then either. So I went out shopping, and I ended up buying a Sony NEX6, and I took it out yesterday to shoot again just for old time's sake. But it's this camera here. I still have it. My old Sony NEX6. Let's see if I use my EM10 Mark II right now for the streaming. So see if it'll get off my face. Somebody made a great recommendation to help me with autofocus. But anyhow, this is it. Um, Still in terrific shape, and you can see even back then I was into having full plate, on the bottom of the camera just for extra security and rigidity of the base plate. Because uh, there's, people break their tripod mounts all the time, and I didn't want to do that. And it doesn't matter what camera. Some are a little more prone to it, it seems, like the M5 Mark III, because it's all plastic. But regardless of camera, people break their tripod mounts, right? Uh, but anyhow, and my priority back then, even in 2013, because I was coming off these little point and shoots, was small size, lightweight system. And I had actually looked at the EM1 Mark One, the original EM1, and it was like $1,100, I think, at the time, before you get any lenses for it. So it was a price a little out of my budget that I had planned on spending. I was shocked at the pricing of cameras when I started actually shopping for them. I was like, holy crap, these things are like $1,000. Because I was buying point and shoots for like $200, right? And then you look at the prices of all the lenses, and anyway, I think I paid like $699 for this Sony NEX with that little kit lens. So I said, okay, I'm getting the lens and the camera. It's pretty small and compact, $699. And it seems like even with the new A6700, they've kind of kept that same form factor. I mean, if I put them side by side, you'd have to look twice to see which was which, I think, because they're both very small cameras, and they haven't changed that much. Uh, but anyhow, I went out shooting with it yesterday, and I thought to myself, I probably could have stuck with that camera for the last 10 years. and a couple lenses that I got for it. I only bought a 35 prime and it was a 70 to 200, I think. Whatever their zoom lens is for that camera, the kit zoom. Probably could have stuck with that for 10 years and get like 90% of my photography done, with the exception of my professional work that I get paid for. I wouldn't be able to do it with that camera. Not easily anyway, right? I'd have to buy another lens and I'd have to really work the menu and the bracketing. It would be a pain on that camera. And that's why when I went shopping, and this was what, only 3 years later, if that, uh, 2 years later, 2.5 years later, I got the M10 Mark II. And that camera very easily transitioned into my professional work because of how customizable it is. And that's ultimately the customization, the small size compact system is ultimately what got me to using my Micro Four Thirds system and being my preferred system of choice for everything that I do, whether it's my professional work. I do commercial real estate photography, architectural type stuff, and I also do. And then for my photo walks, the genre is all over the place, right? And so it's one of those things that, or it's the camera system. It was the being able to customize it so much to make it work even better than my D750 did in terms of workflow and what I had to bring with me on site and the overall size weight of the system, right? I could, I could use smaller tripods. I don't. I use big tripods still, but I did bring very small tripods with me sometimes on some of the photo jobs that I did. Tripods I could not use with my D750 and have the same stability. And of course, but being able to do the my sets, it was on the EM10. So I used the EM10 Mark II for my professional work for a good year, if not almost 2 years, before I got the EM1 Mark II, I believe it was. I got that in 2018 or so. So I used the EM10 Mark II for nearly 2 years professionally. And in all honesty, uh, the only thing the EM1 Mark II brought to the table for my professional work, because I'm on a tripod bracketing, so I don't really need anything, right? And I deliver 2 megapixel images, so the extra megapixels really wasn't non-issue. Uh, what it really brought to the table is I didn't have to change batteries in between shoots or you're even on the same job, right? Because the M10 Mark II, the battery I could easily get through one job with it, which was typically only 200 shots at most. But sometimes it was a little bit time consuming and the monitor's on constantly, right? So uh, with the M1 Mark II, I was able to go through at least one, even two photo jobs a day easily on a single battery. So it did save me some of that. And the workflow is a little bit more streamlined with the custom modes right on the dial itself. But my point is that uh, there's really no reason uh, not to use Micro Four Thirds. Now, someone brought up, as I mentioned earlier in the stream a couple weeks ago, about why I don't miss full frame, and they had wished I had seen or showed, uh, like an astro image at night, doing a 20-second exposure for at ISO 3200 or 6400. I forget what it was. It was, he wanted to see like a single shot high ISO image in comparison, because in that video I only compared like my normal street photography stuff I do all the time, right? I'm usually in decent light, and having high ISO performance is, again, not an issue at all because I'm always usually near base ISO or just a little over. Uh, and then there was a lot of talk about, all the usual tropes when it comes to why people use full frame, right? They like the shallower depth of field, they like the better noise performance, and of course, more recently, the autofocusing performance has always seemed to be better in for subject tracking, for eye detect, all these things, right? And none of those things really apply to my photography, uh, because again, professionally, I'm on a tripod, and for my personal stuff, I'm just shooting landscapes. I'm not shooting people. And even when I did shoot people, face detect was perfectly fine, right? You get close enough, you're perfectly fine. There are cameras. The EM1 Mark III and the OM1 now don't have an issue with it. But when I was using like the EM1 Mark II and my EM10, if the face got too small in the frame, like maybe this much as opposed to what I'm at now, uh, yeah, the face detect was a little spotty and the focus wasn't that reliable. But who's going to shoot somebody this far out? What good is that picture anyway? Uh, but I get it. There's definitely some performance advantages in other camera systems that you still don't really find in Micro Four Thirds. But these are very, very small things, and they generally speaking, for the general public, I don't think these are deal breakers, or they should not be deal breakers, because real photography is, I would say, at least 80% skill set, right? Once you develop your skill set in photography, all the basic things, right? The fundamentals of exposure, understanding the limitations and strengths of your camera system, and being able to navigate through all the different features and functions that you have, and maximizing those settings to get the best out of the camera. All of that part is about 20%, but 80% is still skill set, right? Anticipating the shot, if you're like in street photography and sports action wildlife, uh, understanding light, using flash, all these things. These are all skill sets that, as a if you really want to get good in photography, you need to develop that. And if you do that, you can get away with a point and shoot camera if it has the features you need, right? Some point and shoot cameras don't have hot shoes and things like that, right? But uh, I would argue that I could get away with even a point and shoot camera for my professional work, like the my little XZ2. Well, it's in there, but the XZ2 has a hot shoe on it, right? And because I'm bracketing and uh, and all the post processing I do with my professional work, I could get away with that XZ2. The only limitation would be it's not quite wide enough for a lot of the kind of shots that I would need to take. So at least 80% is skill set. And this is what I think, um, this is where I feel like Olympus or OM Systems now is really devoting a lot of their time on their YouTube channel. And then people like myself and Robin and Peter and Jimmy, and we try to, you know, show you the photography side, give you the skills that you need to get the best out of your camera. You could watch any of our channels really, regardless of the camera system you have, and be a better photographer, I believe. Of course, my channel is mostly about teaching how to use the camera, right? So maybe not mine so much, but my friends over there, they are, they're really, they really care about photography, and they care about you getting the most out of your equipment and being able to do photography and enjoy photography. Uh, because that's really what I think is going to save the camera in general, because there's so much competition now, right? From cell phones and the AI stuff that's come out. There's all kinds of distractions. These are kind of distractions to me, right? Real photography is you get a camera, you have different lenses, you have tools, right? Cameras are tools. You have the tools and the ability to get other tools to work with the system so that you can get the most out of your photography. Uh, and this is where I really think people should focus on. And then also, and I'm kind of transitioning into what I think camera manufacturers should be doing, but make some cameras that are interesting. that, kind of pull at our heartstrings, right? Like the Olympus Pen F did for me. That was the camera that I still love and enjoy to this day. It's my most used camera. Uh, and that's the one that's beat up. I got a funny comment last week about how do I keep my OM1 looking so good, because theirs are all beat up, and there's maybe some complaints about the cosmetically the durability, right? Not the actual camera, but it's getting scuffed up and stuff a little bit too easily, maybe. But for me, my OM1 goes in a camera bag, then out of the camera bag onto a tripod, and that's it, right? Because I use that 99% just for my professional work. It doesn't go with me out in the field every day like my Pen F does, or my EM10 Mark II at the time. And the EM10 Mark II, which is now my webcam, is beat to hell. Let me tell you, it's got scuffs and scrapes everywhere. It's got dents in it. Pen F's got a couple dents, and plenty of scratches. Uh, but they're just fabulous cameras, and I would and the other argument was some of the features of the Micro Four Thirds system, like the focus stacking, the high res shot mode. These things are just gimmicks, or not. They didn't use the word gimmick, but that they are pretty much uh, no point to them, because a professional or somebody serious about doing these kinds of photography would take these images and stack them. Like if you're doing focus bracketing, you would take the individual images and stack them in third-party software. If you're doing high-res shots, you do Brazier method. I said Brazier. I don't know what it's called. Where you take multiple pictures and stitch them together, so you get a high-res shot mode. There's lots of ways to achieve that, right? Whereas, the Olympus cameras, you have the live comp, you have the focus stacking, you have the high-res shot mode. It does all of these things in camera for you. And it's about making photography more fun, right? It's not about getting the best result, because again, if you want the best results, you can do the same thing with a Micro Four Thirds camera as you can with any other camera. You can go ahead and take the individual images, stack them in third-party software. You can do that Bresner method or whatever it's called. You can do, get an ND filter and do long exposures. You can do everything, and if you develop your skill set for this kind of photography, you'll definitely get better results. Again, regardless of camera system. Uh, Now, the argument can be made if you're shooting in low light all the time, you know, and maybe that shallow depth of field is your signature look in your portfolio for getting clients. And I'm assuming wedding, people type, portrait type stuff, outdoors, indoor events. The argument can be made, yeah, go with a full frame system, right? Because there's going to be less work uh, in post processing to minimize the noise, to work with the depth of field, et cetera, et cetera. And there's certainly a lot of professionals. That's the only way they're going to go. And this is where Micro Four Thirds is never going to put a dent in that kind of photography, because it's just physics, right? You got bigger sensor, shallower depth of field, less noise, etc. These are things that, in an event or fast-moving situation, that uh, sometimes you don't have time to deliver or post. I'm sorry, you don't have time to post process your images. You have to deliver these sometimes instantly, right, via Ethernet cable right into the camera. Some of those pro cameras have that. You have to deliver these instantly. So I get it, right? But I'm talking about the consumer level and prosumer and pseudo professionals like myself that work professionally. Most of us, Micro Four Thirds is it. So why carry all this humongous gear? Why spend like $6,000 on a Sony A1 and $12,000 on a 600 f4, when for a third of that price you can get an OM1 and a 300 f4? You know, and there's been plenty of side by side tests, A1, OM1, that I've seen, where there's not 3 or 4 times the price difference, in my opinion, uh, to spend that much, $20,000 for a Sony system to do the same thing you can with an OM1, if you're into that kind of photography. So yeah, I'm a Micro Four Thirds fanboy, but I think I can justify it because I enjoy photography immensely when I'm shooting with my Micro Four Thirds system. I shoot it professionally, I make a living from it, and I've never had any complaints from any of my customers about the quality of my images that I deliver. And, in fact, it's mostly, again, skill set on site with the camera that you have. Because, like I said earlier, I could probably use that XZ2 because it has a flash hot shoe and deliver the same kind of quality to my clients, because a lot of that is the skill set on site, and then post processing in the beginning. The camera in the middle is just one tool in that chain of events to deliver professional results, or to get professional results if you're just doing it as a hobby. Uh, and it's not the weakest link by far. The weakest link is always your photography skill set, because a lot of times I talked about this with Eric Jennings, right, in another stream, where he was debating between an OM1 and EM1 Mark III if he wanted to get into birding and wildlife. And my advice was, if you develop your skill set on the EM1 Mark III, you don't need bird detect, you know, because you'll be really good at tracking by eye, so you can get that focus point in the center. The autofocusing system on the EM1 Mark III is more than good enough for that kind of uh, autofocus on birds and things. If you want subject detect, it's kind of a crutch for people like myself getting started in birding, because it just man, that thing just focuses like that. It's and catches the bird is pretty amazing. But any skilled photographer could outshoot me all day long, get more birds in focus. If they're really skilled, they could probably do it with a manual focus lens and get more keepers than I would. Uh, but so I don't want to minimize all of the features that our cameras have these days, but I don't want to, don't underestimate having a good skill set in your photography. So let me catch up on the chat because I've been rambling forever. Um, see how everybody's doing. Wow, there's a lot of people here. Lasse, good to see you. Robin is here. My goodness, Robin Wong, how are you? And let's see. Robin Schaefer, Lasse, Dave Nelson, good to see you. Big robot news today. Wow. Okay, I like that. Now, Rick, how are you, Rick? Oh, since you're here, Rick, I wanted to show you. Rick sent me his watch, right? That he wore to death. Uh, I my memory's so bad. He gave me a lot of backstory on this watch, but this is a Loris field watch, and I got a new band for it that's very similar to what was on there. But thank you so much for sending me this watch, Rick. You're right in that it's very, very, I forget that I'm wearing it sometimes because it's very thin and small and very comfortable on my wrist. Uh, but it's a great watch. Let me get a close up there. And it's in terrific shape, right? Even the loom still works really well. It doesn't stay on for more than about 30 minutes. So it is wearing out, but it's very bright when it starts out. So that shows you the quality of the loom, or chemicals they use for the loom in the dials. So thanks so much, Rick. I really appreciate it. I wear this every day now. It's like my daily watch. Roberto's here, and Mark and Dave, and okay, and Marco, good to see you. Thank you for the memory sticks. I have probably the most generous viewers on YouTube, because you guys send me just nothing huge, right? Just little things here and there that add up to make either my life happier or easier in one form or another. Like this watch makes me so happy when I put this on and I think about that this was a gift from one of my viewers. It just makes me happy, and it's very comfortable. To more practical things, like Marco sent me some memory sticks for my new laptop, which is awesome. So thank you so much, Marco. I appreciate that. And I haven't tested that other thing I talked about, because once you snap everything back together, it's it's hassle to unplug, and I'll do that diagnosis later. Uh, Thomas is here, the great Vanzini. All right, awesome. And Steve Kunder from Michigan. So why am I not able to scroll on the chat here? Oh, here we go. Oh, let's see. Let me see if I can address any questions here. David Tellett, good to see you. I saw David yesterday on one of the photo walks with the photo club. And Jeff Painter. And a lot of you have such interesting backstories. Always feel free to email me. um, it's rob@robtrek.com. But I try to read them all. It's always very interesting because a lot of people share their story with their camera system. Obviously, it's got Olympus, but Robert Volk here says, when using the camera focus stacking with my 12 to 100 lens, where in the image should I place the focus point? Are the focus stacks radiating from the bottom from the frame up? Okay, so there's two modes. I want to make sure, because not everyone, these terms are used interchangeably, but they're different. There's focus stacking and focus bracketing. Focus stacking is available on the higher end Olympus cameras. So if you're going to do focus stacking, where the camera takes all of the focus bracketed images and stacks them together in camera, you want to focus somewhere in the center, because when you do focus stacking in camera, it'll focus here, then back up, and then focus forward like that. So it gets a little bit in focus in the front and then more behind. So it's about maybe 20% in front, maybe 30% to about 60 or 70% behind, where it's going to focus off that first point. If you use focus bracketing, bracketing is where it just takes the focus bracketed images. It doesn't stack it in camera. In that case, you want to focus on the closest point that you want to start to acquire focus. And then it starts from that point and goes forward to the back. So you start at the closest point, then it brackets out to the furthest point. And then, you have to make your adjustments for steps and increments, through experimenting. But functionally, that's the main difference between the two. So depending if you're stacking or bracketing, stacking, focus somewhere in the middle, more towards the front. And then for bracketing, always start in the front at the closest point. Let's see. Any other quick questions here? Scott Mumford, of course I remember you. Yeah, it has been a while. Yeah. And Walter's here. Hey, Walter, how's it going? Walter's a good friend of mine who lives here. Known him since like college. And let's see. Steve Gover says, hi, Rob. I'm new to the OM1. Just bought a 45 to 200 Lumix. Will the lens Mega OIS work on the OM1? I think you have to pick one. You have to pick either lens stabilization or in-camera stabilization. It won't sync those together. So you pick one, and there's a line item in the autofocusing, or there's a line item somewhere in the menu system that says use lens IS priority or IBIS priority, stabilization priority. So if I would recommend you just use the in-camera stabilization, unless you're always zooming out to 200 millimeters, then you might want to try using the lens stabilization, because on the longer the focal length, 200 millimeters or higher, generally the lens stabilization is probably the better of the two. Just rule of thumb. Every lens is different. How good the stabilization is in a lens is, it's going to depend on the lens. But I think with that lens, you're safe just using the IBIS in camera, and it's going to ignore, just turn off the IBIS on the lens, and you should be fine. Let's see. And wow, thank you, Robin. Robin made a little super chat there. I really appreciate that. You don't need to do that, but I appreciate that. Um, says here, here's some Kopi O from Malaysia. One of these days I'm gonna have to get off my butt and travel again. But Malaysia would probably definitely be a place I go back to, just because you're there, Robin. But Malaysia was really the food was so good. Um, it's but it's been like 20 years since I've been to Malaysia. And John, you say dropped in for a bit. Uh, Hopefully you're watching this later. And John Rubino says, I currently have OMD M10, planning on a 7-week hike in Europe. Is it worth upgrading the M5 Mark II for the weather seal? And you have the 12 to 45 Pro. Yeah, definitely. The M5 Mark II is better in every way than the EM10. And it's, I mean, not that it's around $400 for one that's probably in mint condition. It's not that expensive relative to what cameras cost today, but it's going to not only give you weather sealing, but it's also going to give you additional features that you don't have on the M10. Uh, like it has a much better build quality. It has the high-res shot mode, which can be useful. Since you have a really good lens there, you will see the benefits of the high-res shot mode pretty easily. Um, I believe it also has the in-camera focus stacking. It has a better image stabilization system. It also has, on the video side, if you do any video, it has a separate microphone jack. So if you want to vlog a little bit with that camera, because it also has the fully articulating screen, that's really nice to have. And then on top of all of that, you have a bigger EVF. So when you look in the EVF, it's the same resolution, I believe, like 2 megapixels or something, but it's magnified more. So you got a larger field of view or larger view of the scene through the EVF. So there's a lot of reasons to upgrade to the M5 Mark II other than the weather sealing, and I would strongly recommend it. Uh, if for all of those reasons on top of the weather sealing. I also, if you can, I like this grip. This is the Olympus original OEM grip for it. I got it when it was on the refurb site for 30 bucks. Uh, if you can find this for less than 50 bucks, this is like makes it's like a night and day difference in the handling of the uh, EM5, especially with the 12 to 45 f4, which is this is about the same size as that lens, maybe a little smaller, but uh, this is an excellent upgrade. The only downside to this is if you want to attach it to a tripod, you need to use the Arca Swiss plate and put it on top versus, most of my grips are like this, where the plate is actually an Arca Swiss plate, right? So you don't need to attach a separate one. You can just mount it directly to the tripod. That's the only downside to this. Um, and then you have to take it off to put batteries in. But the memory card is here on the side. This is also really, really nice to have that the EM10 Mark II does not have. Um, it's a little thing. It's not a deal breaker if you don't have this on your camera, right? Like a lot of cameras don't. But it just makes it a little nicer to use, right? In the long term. Okay, let's see. Um, yeah, Rick still uses his EM5 Mark II professionally. There's a this to me, the EM5 Mark II. I mean, when it first came out, it was priced, a little bit high relative to all the other cameras in the market. On the surface, it looked a little bit expensive, and but when you really deep dive into a camera like this, when you look at the build quality and all of the features that it has, and the capability and the image quality, uh, even at full price, this camera is a bargain. And now that you can buy these for 400 bucks or less, if one's a little bit beat up, you could probably get it for like 250. I mean, this is still extremely capable, durable, weather sealed, excellent camera. And I've since I bought this little grip for it, I've really been enjoying using it more. I still rather take my Pen F out. Generally speaking, like if the two are side by side, I'll pick up the Pen F every time. But uh, sometimes, I like, if I think I'm going to be using longer lenses or just feel like it, I just take this out because it has a better EVF, and this is actually a much easier camera to handle and use and enjoy than the Pen F. But the Pen F is kind of a camera that I like. I just like how it looks more. And somebody's asking Robin Wong about the Olympus Air. It's hard to find the app for it. I found the app for it on Amazon. So I was able to download it from the Amazon App Store for my Android phone. The Apple one you might be able to find somewhere else, but uh, honestly, I wouldn't waste. I bought mine for 200 bucks, which included the lens, the 12 to 32 or 12 to the 14 to 42 zoom lens, the pancake zoom, power zoom lens. I think maybe it was 250. So I was basically getting it because I wanted that lens more than I wanted the Olympus Air. Uh, but I bought it. I used it a couple of times. There's probably 20 or 30 shots on it, and I've never touched it again. Because that camera, you have to be very, very creative when you use it. Uh, and I hate using my phone for anything photography related. The only thing I really use my phone for when I'm doing photography is to set the time and date. Because a lot of times I have to sync multiple cameras, the time and date have to be exact, right? So I use my phone to sync with each camera individually so that the time and date exactly match on every camera. And then when I'm recording video or taking photos, each camera has the proper time and date set. So it's probably the best way to set the time and date on the cameras through the app because then it's down to the second, but you have to do it every month because the clocks in those tend to drift, if not just zero out altogether, and you're back to 1999. Uh, but anyhow, yeah, my opinion is don't waste your money on that. Buy the 25 millimeter 1.7 from Panasonic for less than that, or the Olympus. I buy a lens before I buy that camera. And Big Robot says the M43 is still good for weddings for less weight, but it's nice to use DxO Deep Prime. It's personal choice that works for you. Yeah. Yeah, the software has definitely mitigated a lot of the noise from the images to the point that uh, I'm more than happy with everything that I get from my Micro Four Thirds system. Uh, of course, noise software can be applied to full frame sensors just as much as it can Micro Four Thirds, and all of that image quality scales accordingly. But for all intents and purposes, I don't see any reason to use a full frame system and add on all that bulk in the field. It just doesn't work because I don't do wildlife photography professionally, and even if I did, I don't know if I would use a different system. But it's not something I can speak to personally. Uh, Let me ask you guys, are you guys seeing the oh, I have the chat window really tiny. Uh, I don't know why it's so small. This chat window. I didn't even pay attention. The text is tiny on the side. I didn't set it up properly. Um, yeah, sorry about that, Rick. I might be able to fix that real quick. Let me see. Let me just take a minute. There it is. I'm just going to use a generic. This is not my preferred chat fonts and things, but this should help. Um, almost there. Let's try 30, 40. 30 there, 30 there. I totally forgot to set this part up. There we go. Now it's too big. Messages. But that's fine. I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to mess around with that anymore. One more thing I should do, though. Okay, hopefully that's a little easier to see. Okay. Yeah, Marco, when I was talking about the cameras, yeah, the build quality and feel of the Micro Four Thirds system, uh, you know, definitely is top notch. I mean, it's top tier gear, so to speak. I don't think really any other camera system has anything on the Micro Four Thirds systems. Especially the more entry level models. The OM system cameras are just the build quality is really amazing, really up there with pro gear in a lot of cases. Um, oh, please do CCD versus CMOS video. Um, okay, it's not really my expertise. A little bit out of my scope of knowledge. Um, usually, most of the CCD cameras are so old now, but I have a few. The best I could probably do is just take some shots side by side on a photo walk and show them to you, and then let you decide for yourself what you like better. But I think there's a lot of videos out there about the technology of CCD versus CMOS, and ultimately you can't buy CCD cameras anymore. So I didn't really commit it to memory how that works. Uh, but I'll give that some thought. few people have asked me to do that. You know, it's okay. It's interesting. I have shot them side by side, and I've shot with CCD cameras. And ultimately, I didn't see. I'm kind of with Robin Wong. He did one, so you can watch Robin Wong's video. He did. He'll probably do a better job than I ever will. But definitely, I'm leaning towards. There's not that much difference between the two. Uh, at base ISO and good light, there's a huge difference now between a modern CMOS camera and a older CCD camera. There's a big difference in ISO performance. It only goes downhill after about ISO 400. It goes downhill pretty fast. So in that sense, I don't see any reason to shoot with CCD anymore, because even if the tech has just not kept up. There was a very small window where astrophotographers preferred CCD sensors because they did have less noise, or they had some advantage over CMOS at the time, but that's just not the case anymore. John Matthews says, you've changed the lens. Uh, Actually, I'm using the 17 millimeter 1.8. I rearranged my entire uh, streaming setup here. I'll show you guys one day. I'd show you now, but I'd have to set something up to show you. I mean, you can see the background is crooked. Jeez. I need to straighten this out. There. Okay. Now I'm level. It's ironic because as a architectural photographer, I'm very conscious of straight lines, and I can't believe I missed that. But uh the key difference to my studio now is just lighting. Lighting is so important when it comes to either video or photography. So I've actually changed the lighting setup. So I got my purple YouTube light in the background. I've got a key light here, a flat panel LED, and then I have my normal, just the overhead lamp on the ceiling fan there for a little bit of nice light on top. The trick is to blend that purple light with all the ambient light going around, and then setting the white balance on the EM10 Mark II. I think actually I was using the 25 1.8 in my older streams, but that's because I had the camera further away. So I'm doing opposite what you said here, John, is I went from the 25 1.8 to the 17 1.8, but now the camera is at arm's length, whereas before the camera was, much further away. Okay, and okay, so the font works now, right over here on the chat. It's important I put the chat in the stream. See, it needs a little bit of a margin on the left side, but you got most of the letters there. Do I use a sound mixer? I do not use a sound mixer. I'm actually just using a wireless lav here, Mike, which I'm going to do a review on this soon. I got half the video done. I'm really late. I'm like 2 weeks late on producing this. They'll probably never send me another product again because I take so long to do these reviews. But I spent the first week trying to, doing all those Ask Rob Trek videos. And then I had to, and then this week I've been really busy with photo jobs. If you guys are interested, I can show you some of the shots I did this week on my commercial real estate. I posted a few on my Instagram. And but no, I just plug this into my all right. You know what? I'm just going to show you the setup. That's like the third question about my streaming setup. So, and then we'll talk about cameras again. I see some questions there. I use my OM1. Now, a lot of people, while I'm doing this, I'll just talk about the noise performance. A lot of people are saying they don't see a real difference in the noise performance. Like if you go on the DP review, and by people, I mean other review websites. Um, got battery? Oh, no battery. Let me get a battery for it. And I think, if you're just doing single, even the EM1 Mark II, right? Um, but I noticed something because I'm doing a video on all right. So I got autofocus on. I don't really need it. Let me make sure I got monitor out. I'm still here. Let me just set this up real quick. Let's see, autofocus. Turn off stabilization. And yeah, that should be it. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. It's a little bit low. It's a little bit cut off too. Hold on. There. Now you can see the whole thing. So yeah, this is my stream setup, right? So this is I'm going to do a review on this as well next week. But yeah, here's my streaming box. There's my new laptop. This is my EM10 Mark II with the 17 f1.8. I bought this monitor, I forget, late last year or early this year. This is my new 4K monitor, finally. After about 8 years, I finally got a new monitor. And then, this is my old monitor. This is just an ultra wide, but it's a 1080 monitor. It's not a 4K. So I got 3 monitors set up. And then this monitor is strictly for the live stream for this box. So I can switch between the different things. And then I have this overhead microphone that I use sometimes. Get that up. So I got this overhead one that I use sometimes. So I can slide this in and out. And then over here, this is where I do the overhead tutorials, right? So I'll take a camera and I'll put it down. I finally got my Fuji. This is a Fujifilm camera. I finally put it to good use because it's just been sitting in the shelf. But this lets me do the overhead shots, right? For my tutorials. But I have to flip it. I think I flip it this way, yeah. And then this is my front cam. But yeah, this is the setup in general. A little bit of water here. My headphones. So again, when I'm recording, the videos, I use the headphones to listen to it to make sure it sounds okay. And then I got all these little trays underneath for different things. But yeah, this is my setup, and that, my mouse pad. I love this mouse pad. You can see that pretty well, right? But okay. Oh, that's the back of my head. See if I'm balding a little bit. Yep. Here it comes. Oh, man. At least in the front, I look okay, right? That's the setup. So, see. So Jason, that's how I used to do the sound, is plugged into this this HDMI switch box. So I don't use any fancy, because they got those Rode Podcaster big boxes with the sliders. I got enough on my desk already. And I didn't see any other questions. Um, so that's good. Now, the noise perform. Okay, so this is something I noticed when I was doing, and I'll share with you some images. Let me see if I can find that. I'm working on a time lapse video, how to do time lapses. I mean, I've done one before, but this one's going to be a little bit different. Let's see. Where did I publish that video? That goes so much for my memory. Videos. Maybe it's in the folder. Because I want to give you the context of how I discovered this noise difference and performance and noise difference between the OM1 and the previous generation sensors. Because it's pretty significant difference. And it happens when you do long exposures. Let me look in this folder. Nope. Is it on my desktop? I was just watching it the other day. Oh, here it is. Yeah. All right. So let me drag this over. And open this up. So this is what you get in the stream sometimes. You get to preview what I'm working on. Let me use this software. I need to get it onto the laptop screen. Please. Control F. How do you get full screen on this? F11? Okay. That's not even the right video. It's going to be worth it. Trust me. It's going to be worth it when I find it. Where is it? What is this video? Nope. Oh, I can't believe it. Why can't I find it now? The videos published. It's not here. And tests here. I can't believe I can't find it. This is good content, huh, guys? Sorry, I can't find it. Let me see if it's here. Videos. No. Oh, what's this? All right, this might work. This is an older version of it. And faster. With Wix, you can edit. Why is there an ad on this? I put no ads. All right, here we go. Laptop. Laptop screen. OBS. All right, here we go. So I'll start from the beginning. You probably can't hear the music for it, but I got like this really dramatic music in the background. So this is a video I'm working on. I put some clips in from some previous time lapses that I've done. And also some ones I started working on. And then this I thought was just a neat clip of Ellie, so I just threw it in there. Okay. There we go. So when I was making the video, I'm working on a video that's gonna be part of it. A newer version. That's the old version. This one I discovered pretty big difference in the noise performance. So since I have the OM1 hooked up, I'll just demonstrate it. Let me put a memory card in here. Like I could have just started with this, right? Instead of looking for that video. So I'm going to put it into shutter priority. Let's see. Let me switch over. So shutter priority. We'll just do a 5-second exposure, okay? Let me take a picture of something dark. Ah! Okay, we'll do 5 seconds here. Okay, and then let me play that back. And if you look at it, it's pretty clean, right? Not really not a lot of noise in there. So, all right. I'm going to do the same thing with, say, EM5 Mark III, if it has batteries. Or the Pen F. I don't know. Let's do the Pen F. There's no batteries in that. Let's do the batteries on this. Oh, I have a cable. Sorry. This has a battery, right? Yeah. So I'm going to do a 5-second exposure on this camera. And it's the same whether I use the EM5 Mark III or my Pen F. The noise is the same. Plug in there. There we go. Let's see. All right, so we'll do the same thing. Shutter priority, full screen. Five seconds. Okay, you see these little dots and specks? There's another speck there. These little dots and specks, you know, that wasn't a great example, but the dots and specks are all over the place once you bump the ISO up to say 800 or something like that. Whereas on the OM1, you don't get those weird hot spots everywhere, dots and specks. And this was a problem when I was shooting the night sky, when I was doing the time lapse from day to night. All the stars and everything got all washed out from all these little red, blue, white dot specks everywhere. Uh, on any of my other cameras, the EM5 Mark III, the Pen F, the EM5 Mark II, any of my other cameras, I could not do long exposures because I set up the time lapse to go up to 8 seconds. So I did 8 second exposures, and the ISO would jump to like 1600, and I was getting just unbelievable noise in my other cameras. But the OM1, clean, no specks, and I mean there was a little bit of luminance noise, but no chrominance noise. It's a huge difference in the OM1. Uh, and that's something I've not seen up until this point when I started doing this kind of photography. So when people say there's no difference in noise performance between the cameras, uh, they're not doing what I did. They're not doing long exposures at high ISO, and you know that's where I saw a huge difference. Okay, sorry, forgot to put the chat back on. Let me see if there's any other questions came in. Uh, and Sipit TV says you've been a viewer, I guess, for a long time. It got cut off there. And then, okay, here's a question. If you have any, okay, so if you have any other questions, this is a good time to ask because I've kind of done talking about everything I wanted to talk about. I think. Actually, I have a list here. Oh, I have not finished. Well, you know, I think what people consider as expensive is relative, right? If you enjoy shooting film, it's not too expensive. I mean, the cheaper the better, of course. But I don't shoot that many rolls of film. If that was my only way I was shooting, yeah, it'd be a little costly to do it that way. But if I enjoyed it as a hobby, I wouldn't mind it, right? If you think about what hobbies cost these days, what's a digital camera cost? Anywhere from 600 to a couple thousand for a halfway decent camera. You could probably buy 100 rolls of film of that, right? If you divide that out, yeah, you could probably buy 100 rolls of film, whether it's black and white or color. Because black and white, I found some Arista, and I also found Kentmere. You can get those for $5 or $6 a roll and process them yourself. It's pretty simple to do, and the processing can be done very cheaply, like $1 a roll if you do it yourself. So for about $7 a roll in black and white, for 24 to 36 exposures, depending on which roll I put in, that's not bad if you enjoy doing it, and as I do sometimes. For color film, if you develop it yourself, you can get it down to about $1 a roll. But most of the time I just take color film in when I have it, and color film runs from $8 to $20 a roll. It's a lot more expensive, and if you shoot medium format film, tiny bit more, right? Um, but you get less frames. You get like 12 shots on medium format, depending on the camera, instead of 36. Uh, so the cost per image is a lot higher on medium format, even if initially each roll looks about the same price, right? So I don't think it's too expensive. Uh, if you're spending $20, say, for 24 shots, I think if you enjoy it and to get something different that nobody else is doing, that no digital camera can recreate, I don't see a problem with it. You know, um, ultimately, it is going to get to a point to where it's not worth it, right? Say if it was $50 a roll, maybe I'd be like, I might shoot one roll a year at that rate. But you know, since I can develop black and white, all in about $7 a roll, I don't have a problem with it. Uh, and if I do color, if I pay for developing, it runs about say $20 to $25 a roll. I'm still okay with that because I don't shoot film that often, and it gives you a look that you can't reproduce, despite all this film simulation software and all that out there. You just can't reproduce the look of film. But more importantly, you cannot reproduce the experience that you get when you shoot with film. Using an old film camera, um, you know, if you like shooting film, you like the experience of shooting film. It's not. I think it's worth it, right? Even at $25 all in per roll developed. Because there's a lot of time on the side. If you scan it yourself or if you have them scan it, there's in processing that, there's just a lot of work in it. But if you enjoy it, you enjoy that basically full analog process from start to finish and print if you have a dark room or just have the prints delivered to you, right? I don't think it's that bad. Uh, but yeah, that's my opinion. I think even at 25 bucks a roll for color and $7 to $10 a roll on the black and white, I'm okay with it because I enjoy it. It's just a hobby. I certainly wouldn't do it professionally, but even professional, let's say you do portrait work professionally and film is your signature look using film. I still think it's, worth it. I don't really see why not, honestly. And Dave says, I have the 7 to 14 and I love it. I've not noticed distortion or aberration, anything I've taken with it yet. Yeah. If it's the Olympus 7 to 14 on Olympus camera, it's going to be perfect. You want a USB-C type. Okay. Sorry, I'm just skimming through the comments very quickly here. Looks like there's a question here. I have an Olympus EM5 Mark III and was wondering if upgrading to the EM1 Mark III or Panasonic G9 is even worth it. Uh, Short answer is no. The only thing I'm not familiar with the G9. It's a great camera and it's one I'm eventually going to own. But um, the only thing the M1 Mark III is going to give you uh, is like handheld high-res shot mode, live ND, um, for better 4K video because you can do OM log 400 with it. Better battery life, probably almost double in battery life. And also, if you do face detect, take picture. If you use the face detect feature in eye detect, the face and eye detect on the M1 Mark III is way better than the EM5 Mark III. But image quality, ultimately, image quality is the same. And the handheld high res shot, the live ND, the in camera focus stacking. Well, you have that on EM5. But these things can all be done, uh, just get a tripod and do your high res shots if you want that feature. It's easy to carry an extra battery versus having the extended battery life of an EM1. Now the EM1 Mark III, the other key advantage is the ergonomics, right? That grip is really nice. The M1 Mark III probably has the most comfortable grip I've ever handled on a camera, even more than the OM1. And in that sense, you know, it makes it's really, really nice. So if you if if it's not stretching your budget, it doesn't there's no reason not to get the EM1 Mark III. Uh, trade in your EM5. Just even if they give you like a dollar for it, just don't keep it. I mean, don't take a dollar for it, but you know what I mean. They'll probably give you like 200 or 300 bucks for your EM5 Mark III, or if you know somebody that you can sell it to for like 600 or 700 bucks, even better, and get the M1 Mark III for like 1,000. That would be worth it. Uh, I think just for the ergonomics of the grip, because it's so much easier to handle. Like this 12 to 40 Pro 2.8. This is like bread and butter. I mean, this is the best combination ever. Uh, I never use this lens on my smaller cameras like my Pen F or my EM5s. I only use this lens on the OM1 if I'm going to be hand holding at all. I use this lens if I'm on a tripod sometimes on my other cameras, but I never hand hold it. That to me is the biggest advantage, quote unquote, deal breaker between the EM5 Mark III and the EM1 Mark III is this is the deal breaker, grip or no grip for me. Uh, all the other features, even if they had identical features, just having the grip alone to me is worth it. Okay. Um, why was I late starting with this new watch? The usual. I was having audio problems. I could not get I could not get sound into the stream. And I started like 20 minutes before the stream started trying to fix the audio. It's such a headache. And Thomas says my EM10 Mark II oversaturates vibrant colors like red, especially flowers. I shoot JPEG to muted RAW, but RAW also struggles even when I lower exposure comp by one stop and vibrance in post. Any suggestions? Yeah, that's red is for whatever reason, red is a very, very strong color on any digital sensor. We're saturated, generally speaking, regardless of which camera I'm using. And I have a lot of different cameras. And my only suggestion is in post processing is dial back to red. You should have individual saturation sliders in your software, even in Olympus Workspace. There's individual saturation sliders for red. And I just dial it back in post processing. I do it all the time because there's a lot of things that I shoot, and there's splashes of reds, even in my commercial work. Um, I'll show you a picture. One second. Let me close this window. Drag this over here. Um, this picture here, right? There's red here, red here, red here, red everywhere. I had to dial the red back a lot. And this I shot with my OM1. So it's not just the EM10 Mark II. The EM10 Mark II is a little bit warmer in general, I found, especially with the kit lens. But even my OM1, I have to dial the red back so hard sometimes uh, in my images that so that you have to do it in post processing. I don't think you can really do much in camera to dial the red back that I'm aware of, unless you have a Pen F. Pen F, you can do it. Um, and then traveling through mass, is there an optimum f-stop to use? Um, I would use at least f4, maybe f5.6, just so that you get the sharpest. You kind of optimize the sharpness of the lens itself. That way, when it's stacking in camera, it can easily find the contrast or sharpness from image to image to stack them better. Uh, some people like to shoot all the way to f8, maybe f11, and because you're stacking, that diffraction that could happen at those higher f-stops is mitigated to some degree. So it depends on what your intended delivery is, right? If your delivery is going to be for like social media online, f5.6 is fine. You could go to f11 if you want more depth, but there's no optimum. Because with focus stacking, you can set the increment, right? How many steps do you want it to take, and how far do you want it to step each time for the focus bracketing and stacking? That the aperture is not quite as critical, and in fact, that's why focus bracketing was developed, was to uh, mitigate problems with depth of field because you can't close your aperture down enough in most lenses. And so it's not as critical. Focus stacking was made to make it so that you can use larger apertures, right? Like f4, f5.6, uh, so that you can optimize the sharpness of the lens. So if there's lots of places online that'll tell you what is the sharpest point for any particular lens you might be using, and but just stop it down 2 stops and you're there, right? Unless it's a kit lens, then stop it down 1 stop because kit lenses start pretty high already. And if you're using the 60 millimeter macro, I'm sure Robin Wong would know exactly what f-stop to use. But I would use like f5.6 even on a 60 macro. And would your commercial work ever require medium format for? No, never. Because whoops, sorry. I deliver my images as 2 megapixel images. 1920 by 1080 generally. Not well, a little bit tighter than that. I deliver 4 by 3 images. Uh, I just make sure that the longest side, usually the top, right, the horizontal, is 1920, and then whatever the vertical works out to be to give me 4 by 3. Uh, that's it. So medium format would be a pain because the depth of field would be so shallow, even with a wide angle lens, and super expensive. My God, what's a let's say I don't know, 12 millimeter equivalent. I wouldn't even need 12. I would need like an 8 millimeter equivalent lens in micro four thirds terms, which is 16 millimeter in full frame, and that would be roughly a 20 millimeter lens in medium format, like a Fujifilm, right? So I'd need a 20 millimeter wide angle lens. Um, that would be tough. It would never require it. And let's see. It says, do I do any printing? Yeah, I print all the time. Um, okay, so I'll give you some basic pointers. Every printer is a little bit different. Like I have a Canon P100 now that I use to print. Uh, but the key thing is whenever you buy a printer, it's going to come with its own drivers and printer profiles. Uh, and it's going to be a particular brand, Epson or Canon in this case. Those are the two big ones. HP has one. Uh, but Epson and Canon, I think, are a little bit more popular with if you're going to print yourself. Uh, and you can buy Epson paper, you can buy Canon paper. And if you look in the profiles, if assuming you buy a photo printer, not like a work printer, like a workstation printer that people use in offices, because they have those multifunction printers. Um, I don't know if I can show you, but there's my Canon right over here. That's a wide format P100, and then I have one of the workstation printers kind of right next to it. Uh, that the photo printers like the Epson XP series and the Canon, I forget what they have a name for their Canon the Pixma series, I think. Anyway, they're going to come with profiles for specific types of paper. So you can put in Epson, high gloss, premium, Canon, matte. There's very specific drivers or color profiles for the very specific papers, and each manufacturer is only going to have their own brand. Canon is only going to have drivers for and ICC profiles for their own papers that you can buy off the shelf, right? Same thing with Epson. So when you print from Lightroom or whatever photo editing software that you have, you want to make sure that you check the box, and every editing software I've ever used has this box. Use the printer's profile, or let the printer manage the color profile. And so you check that box, let the printer manage the color profile. And then you want to, my brain just shut down. So we're talking about printers. Oh my God, having like a moment here. The print. So you manage color, yeah. And then, okay. And then when you print from your software, yeah, you do manage color print. Let the printer manage the color profiles. The only thing you want to do in your photo editing software is manage the size of the print. So you want to say you got margins here, left and right. So if you want a white border, right, because you're going to put it in a frame, those are the kind of things you do in your photo editing software. Is you manage the margins and the paper size. But that's it, because the printer manufacturer, whether it's Epson or Canon, has calibrated the color profiles to exactly match the ink and the paper. So you always want to use manufacturer's ink. Don't use generic ink. Use the manufacturer's ink in cartridges. Use the manufacturer's brand, the same brand with the printer. So it's not too dissimilar from like using Panasonic lenses on Olympus bodies and vice versa. You always want to, you can use Epson paper in a Canon printer, certainly, but it's not going to be quite perfect. The perfect match is always use Canon paper, Canon ICC profiles, Canon, let the printer manage the colors. And you should get perfect prints every time. You should. And that's all I do. Is the P100 is a little more complicated than that. It took me a little bit to get it to work right, but my other printers, I've had Epson's XP. Before that, the XP series, I think, is their printer series, or picture series. That one I just used, let the printer manage the colors, and I always bought Epson paper. So that's my tip for using printers. Uh, you can also, now if you'd like to buy specific types of paper from, I think, Red Paper, or there's a lot of different paper companies out there. that give you a lot of variety, right? A lot of times those manufacturers will include an ICC profile that the printer can use so that you get matching colors from what you see on your screen to what you get out of the printer. And this assumes, of course, everything is color calibrated from what you see on your monitor to your photo editing software, has a proofing setup, and also that you're using the correct ICC profile. So the workflow is a little bit more involved overall to get exact matches, but generally speaking, uh, you should be able to get exactly what you see on your. A lot of people that print, they like their monitors at 80 nits. I use mine at 100 nits. Um, I also have monitors at 200 nits on either side. That's because I do video work, and if I do in video work, you really need to be higher, 300 nits, HDR, 1000 nits. Video work is a little bit different. So that's another reason I have multiple monitors and they're different brightnesses so I can see video as it's going to be displayed on people's smartphones and televisions and stuff, right? But for printing, so you need to calibrate your monitor brightness. So you need good calibration hardware. Like this, I use the Spider X system. It's a couple $100. You can find them on sale sometimes for half price, but generally you're going to spend a couple $100 on calibrating your monitor, getting the gear so that you get the correct brightness and colors on your screen. Calibrate that to your photo editing software. Your editing software should have a proofing setup, not just display, but for proofing. I, I, I wish I could walk you through in a more organized pattern, but those are all the things you need to think about. Pro lenses are definitely much better. There's a lot of things that go into pro glass that are not apparent on um, uh, non-pro glass, right? So pro glass goes through a much higher level of manufacturing tolerances, right? So that you get better consistency and less sample variance, lens to lens to lens. This also allows for better autofocusing precision, durability, weather sealing, all the other features of Pro Glass. But optically speaking, um, a lot of times Pro Glass is polished much smoother. They have different coatings, so there's less flaring and ghosting. They have multiple lenses, right? You'll see 12 to 15 lenses in a Pro Glass versus a non-Pro Glass, you might see like 7 lenses, 8 lenses, right? That build up the lens. So there's a lot of optical correction type lenses in a Pro Glass that you don't get in non-Pro Glass. So this leads to less chromatic aberrations like the purple fringing and things. You should get less of that in a Pro lens. And in reference to the polishings and coatings, you're going to get much smoother bokeh as well in the background. The out of focus areas in a pro lens should be much creamier. And a lot of it has to do with the blade design. They usually use more blades, and they also polish the glass even more, so you get less of that onion ring effect in the bokeh, less onion ringing, and less busyness in the background. So yeah, pro lens glass, there's a reason they're so much more expensive. Even though, like, if you just put two pictures side by side, you'll be like, I can't tell a difference, right? But as a professional that's using it day in and day out, and you rely on this to make money, uh, you do start to see these differences in your work and in the images that you deliver to your client. Uh, so definitely, like if I compared my 25 millimeter f1.8 to a 25 millimeter f1.2 Pro, and the depth of field difference, like if you're going for that, was very subtle. Like I would not buy the 25 millimeter 1.2 for depth of field difference that I get in my 25 1.8 non-pro lens. Where I saw the difference though was definitely in the corner sharpness. So pro lenses are typically sharper wide open, than non-pro glass. So I can shoot at 1.2 on a 25 millimeter and 1.8 on my non-pro lens, and the 1.2 will be sharper, generally speaking, right? They're supposed to be sharper. Certainly, when you stop it down just a little bit, it should start to get sharper a lot sooner than a non-pro glass. Um, if you go very high-end glass like Leica, they design their lenses specifically to be sharpest wide open, and it gets less sharp as you stop it down. It's kind of backwards to most lenses, but most consumer grade pro lenses like Olympus Pro, they're pro lenses, but primarily not because they're sharp wide open, but primarily for the 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 quality of the out of focus areas, the chromatic aberrations, the distortion. A lot of that's corrected in camera now, but there should be less distortion to correct, and also a bunch of other defects that come into play, um, that you don't really see unless you're working and making a living off. If you're just like I said, so that's why I don't really buy pro lenses, uh, other than for the reason that I can't get a non-pro version of it. So, for example, the 8 millimeter fisheye f1.8 I own because the next one up is the 9 to 18 f 3.5 or f4, whatever it is. It's a pretty significant difference in terms of f-stop. So I bought it for a pragmatic reason. I wanted to have a very wide aperture, 1.8, in my fisheye lens for astrophotography type stuff. And the 9 to 18, which is pretty equivalent, right? Once you put in the rectilinear, it's a little bit tighter, but uh, I'd have probably gone with that. And you do see a lot of, especially when you get into astrophotography, the Pro Glass generally has less coma, where the it's kind of like a softness or double image. It's hard to explain coma, but uh, there's so many reasons Pro Glass is so much more expensive. I think optically speaking, yeah, in the very fine details, in the fine points, Pro Glass was definitely worth it if you're a professional. If you're not a professional, you're an enthusiast, kind of a toss up. If you have the money, yeah, get the best glass that you can. If you're a little bit on a budget, kit lens is fine. Kit lenses and non-pro lenses. The non-pro lens primes are very, very good. Good enough that you don't, you know, you don't need to waste money on a pro glass, so to speak. Let's see. What sort of improvements do I want to see in the next professional camera OM system? Whew, my needs are pretty minimal. I'll probably buy because I just have gas. But I was getting along fine professionally with my EM1 and even my EM10 I could get away with. But uh, I think as a consumer wanting OM systems to succeed, they need to produce a camera that they need to bump the megapixels, at least 24, but I think they'll need to go to 33 megapixels, uh, just to check that box so they can do 8K video. Um, for whatever reason, video is such a big part of marketing and sales now. And I just say that only because of the fact that every time you see a review for a camera, they talk about the video specs. And if the video specs are lacking, it gets hammered. It gets hammered for not having top of the line video specs. The other thing they need to do is, and I will take this over megapixels any day, they need to improve the tracking. And I'm not talking about the subject detect tracking. The regular tracking on the CAF plus TR, that needs to be improved like 1,000% because it is totally unreliable, useless. Okay, in my opinion. Now I've seen Thomas Eisel, I think that's his name. He's doing really wonderful work for the Micro Four Thirds system. I think he's really one of the best educators on YouTube when it comes to teaching about the Micro Four Thirds systems, how to use it, how to get the most out of it, problem solving, so many good things. But his CAF plus tracking video, I strongly disagree with. Uh, Out of everything he's done, that's the only one I have a problem with because my results, my testing is sharply different than what he did in that video. So, Thomas, no offense. I love you, okay? But that one video, uh, I take issue with because tracking on the OM systems, Olympus cameras just suck. That little green box, okay? The example he gave in his video, and I'll explain why, okay? The example he gave in his video was he had a white card, I think, something like this, right? He had a white card against, that's a really terrible example. Hold on. Here, I'll do this. I'll do the opposite. Basically, he had a card in front of a plain background. He was moving it very slowly, like this, right? My God, anybody can do that. You know, any camera can do that. Uh, my problem is when that thing starts moving around like this, right? uh, and the background is very busy, like I have over here. Like if I'm moving this thing around back here, black against mostly black background, no freaking way is the tracking system going to track that. Okay, and that's what you get with birds in flight because they're going always flying in between trees and clouds. You know, you're never going to be able to use tracking in those situations. So that is something they need to fix. And then some improvements in the organization of the menu. It's not quite as intuitive or as it doesn't quite make sense to me. Some of the things, you know, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, but I know when I'm going in, I'm like, why is this here? This should be over here. Like, for example, okay, I thought of one. Face detect and subject detect. They're in different menu systems. You have bird, train, plane, cats, whatever, right? Animal. There should be face right in that same menu. Why do you have to activate face detect and turn off subject detect and vice versa to use one? They should be in the same menu. All right. So, I mean, I get it. Behind the scenes, functionally, they're different autofocusing systems. So that's why they're in different places in the menu. But to a consumer, it's like if I want to switch from bird detect to face detect or vice versa, I shouldn't have to deactivate or turn one or the other on. You know, I shouldn't have to deactivate and activate subject detect to use face detect. It should be in the same menu. And there's a bunch of other examples like that, like bracketing. Bracketing is a freaking ridiculous. Okay, bracketing. Uh, they have an HDR menu where you can do bracketing plus or minus 2 stops, and then the number of frames, 3 frames, 5 frames, 7 frames, right? And then they have a separate bracketing menu in the computational mode. Why? Why is that separate? Okay. If you want to do HDR, HDR should be strictly, if you want to have an automated HDR like they have built in HDR, right, where it'll stack the images for you, that needs to be in a separate menu. Bracketing needs to be in a totally separate menu. And it shouldn't be a drop down menu. You should be able to dial in, I want 5 frames in one box, and I want plus or minus, you know, I want to spread by 1 stop in a separate box. So you have 2 boxes, number of frames and exposure compensation. Why do you have this drop down menu? 7 frames, zero point 0.3 EV, 7 frames, zero point 0.5 EV, you know, or 0.7 EV, you know, 3 frames, 2 EV. It's like, I don't want to scroll through all that. I want to dial in 5 frames, 1 stop. Okay. That's it. That's all you need. You don't need this drop down menu in different places. One is an HDR because I cannot dial in plus or minus 3 frames, 2 stops in the bracketing menu. I have to go to the HDR menu. That's stupid. That makes no sense to me. Um, well, I'll do. Now I'm on a rant. I got one other problem with the menu system. and that is you can change the color of the grid lines and the focus boxes and things like that, right? And they give you RGB values from like 0 to 255 for red, green, and blue. You got 3 boxes, right? And I mean, I get RGB values, because I do video, and with video, you have to be very conscious of these RGB values. Uh, and in photography to some extent, right? Because in professional work, colors are, my colors have, with real estate and commercial photography, your colors have to be pretty accurate. So I got very accustomed to RGB values because I do graphic design, things like that, right, for my clients. Why? 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 Nobody's going to understand red, green, and blue values. If I want purple, how much red do I dial in? How much blue do I dial in to get purple? You got to dial in, roll that wheel around to the color that you want, and let go. That's all you need. You don't need this stupid RGB value thing. Now, if there's some reason for that, they didn't tell me what it was, right? Maybe there is a reason to have very specific values that you need. I can't think of any. Just have a color wheel. Okay. So menu system, tracking. Those are 2 big ones that they need to clean up a little bit. And I forget what the first one was that I mentioned. Oh, megapixels. That's not as critical to me, but having 8K video to check that box would be good. All right, sorry, Anthony. I didn't mean to rant, but yes, it's been a while. How you been? Thank you. Looking well and healthy. I appreciate that. Use the Pixma G4010 to print 3R, 5R size prints, but they have been a pain. Ink blotches all. Ooh, that's not good. So if you're using Canon paper, Canon ink, you should not be getting ink blotches. So my guess would be is that usually you get ink blotches when you use the wrong paper. Sometimes it's too thick for the rollers, or your rollers have worn out. The little rubber pieces on the rollers have worn out, and the paper's not feeding properly. So that's usually when I see problems with ink blotches, or your heads or the print heads on your printer are bad. But that would be unusual. Um, the great man. I just keep printing until something looks good. Uh, yeah, and I'm gonna wrap it up here soon. How did I get all the way up here? Uh, I'm just scrolling through the chat. Let me go to the bottom and work my way up. Okay, my question is, does Olympus Workspace work through the adjustments in the order of input, or does Olympus Workspace always have a fixed work order? Um, no, the order that Olympus Workspace uses, it's there's definitely some thought put into the order that they put things, but it's not fixed. You can jump to any particular adjustment that you want anytime. You don't have to do it in the order that is presented in the panels. So it's best to develop a workflow of your own that works for you. I have a video on photo editing workflow for Photolab, but it wouldn't be too different for Olympus Workspace. Maybe I'll do one specifically for Workspace, but it'd be almost a mirror image of the video I already did on for Photolab. Uh, so you need to develop a workflow that works for you, and then you can ignore any orders that you see in the software, and that would be true of any software. And Walter says pro lenses have more elements. Yeah, they have more elements. So it's the same thing I just talked about. So he's just validating what I said, basically, I think. Um, thank you, Walter. And let's see, I'm printing until Do I think it's possible for them to bring out a sensor with 26 megapixel and not lose the low light capability that we have? Yeah, it's possible. Sensor tech still has a long way to go. Uh, I think Ben Chappell did a great video on sensor technology. So go to the narrowband channel and check out his video on sensors. I can't remember the name of it. Uh, they could do it. They could do it. Um, like I said, I saw a big jump in noise performance for long exposures on the OM1 versus the previous. So if they can somehow do that for normal exposures, that would be great. But for normal exposures, the noise performance difference, it is better on the OM1 than the other systems. So I would hope that bumping the 26 megapixels, I guess the GH6 uses a 26 megapixel. I haven't seen any comparisons at 20 on the GH6, but that might be a good place to look to see if it can be done now. Is see if what people are doing with the GH6 in terms of noise. Then certainly Olympus could do the same thing, if not better. Uh, but they're going to have to. I think we've talked about this before. They might have to come out with two cameras, a high res camera and a normal res camera, right? High res for landscapes and portraiture type stuff, a regular camera for sports action, general purpose, like a 20 megapixel or 26 megapixel sensor. Zoltan from Maryland, how you doing? Um, you should come out to, maybe you have, maybe you should come out to the photo walks. I go almost every week. Virginia Beltway group on meetup.com. I also have my own meetup group on meetup.com, Rob Trek photography classes. I don't do much there, but the Virginia Beltway meetup is the one that I go to almost every week. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the HP printers, but the what I did want to point out here is the large tanks. They have these like large tank printers now that are really nice. So much more. You pay more up front. That's how they make money because they used to. They make money on inks and they give the printers away practically for free sometimes. But with the large tank printers, they can't make as much money on the ink, so the printers cost more, right? Something's got to give, and those are great. I for my work printer, not for printing pictures, but my work printer for like documents and things. I use the large tank Epson printers. And I bought that printer over a year ago, and I haven't had to change the ink yet. I would have probably had to change it 5 or 6 times by now with the old, small tank printers. And I'm not coming up. B&H Build Expo, no. Um, okay, so I think I'm all caught up. And, one more thing, I wanna say before I go, what was it? My brain stopped again. This is a problem. There was one more thing I wanted to bring up before I went, and oh, I can't remember now. Had to do something with something. Cameras, maybe? Cameras are OM systems. I was talking about noise and sensors and lenses, and there was one more thing though. Maybe it's in my notes. I had all these notes. I think I touched on about like 3 things on this page. It's just when I start to ramble, I can't follow a script. All my videos, I never have a script. So I thought, if I'm going to talk about cameras, I should have a script, right? And at least follow it, but I can't. Um, it's not even on here. Maybe it was a follow up to a question. I don't know. I thought it was profound that like a few minutes ago when I remembered it, I thought it was pretty profound, but now I can't remember it. So I guess that's where we'll call it here. I hate to leave. I love talking to you guys and interacting as much as I can. I have a lot of questions in the chat, not the chat, but in the comment sections of my other videos. There's a lot of questions there that I need to get to. I did print them all out, so I'm going to go through them and make new videos answering all of these questions you guys asked me uh, best I can. So stay tuned for that. I have three things I have to review next week also, three product videos. Uh, so look forward to that. Um, one is the video switcher I just showed you during the stream. The other one is this microphone, and another one is an air blower, which is pretty cool. Just it's kind of thing you would make a neat gift. It's a little pricey to just buy, but it's if it was a gift for a photographer, it's pretty awesome. So we'll see that. And you guys are awesome. So thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I will see you guys again next month. And I forgot where the off button is. There we go. You guys have a good one.